All right, thank you, Sid. So this is
Thanks,
Jeff
Ed.
Person, the USAFL UA umpire head coach, and today is our third virtual clinic for the umpires. The last clinic will be the on-site one at Nationals on Friday at 2 o'clock at Onion Fields. And for today, we have Richard Ogilvie from AFL Canada, who will be hosting our clinic and going through a couple of portions of it. For the goalies, when we get to the bottom of the hour, there will be a breakout session for the goalies, and Sid will initiate that. So jump into that breakout session, stay as long as you would like or need to, and then when you're done or ready, jump on back into the main session. With that, I will turn it over to our host for the evening, Richard Ogilvie.
Thanks, Jeff. Good evening, everyone. And just to reiterate on Sid's housekeeping rules, got a little bit to get through, maybe too much. So if we could hold questions potentially to the end of this first section, we'll hopefully have some time for some questions and then a wider question and answer session at the end. So if we can hold that, it'd be great. So as we've alluded to, we're going to try and do this in two parts tonight. Firstly, just some rules discussion, some of the key rules that come up all day, every day when we're umpiring a game of football, and some of the specific issues that are around that. And then secondly, we'll do a section on the two umpire system, and that's mainly because a lot of us don't get to umpire two umpires for most of the year, but at Nationals we do. So it's a chance to perhaps to refresh ourselves or learn what the basics or the principles are, so that when we get to Austin, then we've got a better chance of working together as a team. All right. So firstly, yes, as I've just said, so first we're going to talk about some critical rules, a little bit on the umpiring, two umpire system, so that's around positioning and control, and the goal umpires will break out. So looking at the critical rules section first, what I wanted to cover was three main areas. The first is player safety, and that's particularly around dangerous tackles. So if you watch the AFL on TV at all, you'll see that the emphasis on protecting the player with the ball and awarding free kicks for dangerous tackles has greatly increased over the last few years. And it's something we need to be aware of and also pay in our day-to-day umpiring. Secondly, some of the nuances around holding the ball. We often do this at quite a high level. I'm going to pick a couple of the key areas and drill into them perhaps a little bit more than we sometimes do. And thirdly, if we have time, we'll touch a little bit on marking contests. Okay, so we talk about dangerous tackles. So the key consideration in everything we do is in umpiring, but specifically, I guess, in the tackle, because that's one of the most contact-to-contact points of a game, is player safety. And so number one, as an umpire looking at any play that happens, you've got to look and say, well, if the tackle was not safe, then that's, everything else is irrelevant. It doesn't matter anymore. The tackle has to be safe for the player who's taken the time and taken the trouble and put their body on the line to going at the ball. They need and they deserve the protection, and they need to be protected from particularly an unsafe tackle. So if we see a dangerous tackle, then the absolute minimum penalty we would expect to see is a free kick. And even that is potentially unlikely, because that would require perhaps an accidental contact that could have been dangerous, but perhaps the guy's hit the ground and stood back up, hasn't actually been winded or had any sign of distress or is in pain. So, but certainly a free kick is an absolute starting point from when you would consider what the range of sanctions would be for a dangerous tackle. But stepping up from there, you would definitely start to look at the higher level of sanctions that are available. So a 25-meter penalty, so a dangerous tackle, and the guy doesn't get up, or he's winded, or they need some assistance to get up, then there's a very clear case there for a 25-meter penalty. And that's even if it's, it's difficult to say that a dangerous tackle is accidental, but they can be. Things happen in the tackle. People stand up, people bend down, people hit at angles that weren't expecting. Really, once you step up from that, and the tackling player has taken the decision to either take the tackled player off their feet, or to sling them, or to otherwise push them to the ground in a way that's completely not necessary, then we're getting into the realms of careless and negligent. And we're also looking then potentially for the player who's been offended against to be suffering some more serious distress. At that point, you're starting to look at more serious penalties. A yellow card is certainly warranted for a dangerous tackle that falls in that category. And if it's really serious, and either there's a serious injury and or there's a real willful intent. A player went to the tackle with no intent other than to try and injure the player who was being tackled, and that clearly is grounds for a red card and a report. So just to keep those in mind. So, a dangerous tackle absolutely warrants a free kick as an absolute minimum, but particularly in this instance, you should feel free to step that up depending on the seriousness and the degree of negligence or willfulness of the player who's made the tackle. The things to watch out for. So I guess the key obligation here, particularly the tackling player. So we're saying the player who makes the tackle takes the responsibility for the safety of the player who's being tackled. And that is doubly so if they choose to lift them off their feet. So again, we say the player who's gone for the ball, they are making themselves vulnerable. They've left themselves open because they are potentially down, picking up the ball. They're focusing on the ball. They are not looking or bracing or being ready for that contact. So that's the responsibility of the tackler to look out for their safety. And as I say, particularly if they decide that they're going to lift them off the feet, then they really are taking responsibility at that point, because at that point, the tackled player has no opportunity to really, to save themselves or brace themselves or prevent injury. So the real risks that we see, and you will see in games, are players who are slung while in possession of the ball. And that really is, a grab of the junker, the big swing, fly around, whether or not they're off their feet. More often than not, they'll come off their feet. But that really is into the dangerous territory, dangerous tackle territory. And of course, sling tackles can happen after the ball has been disposed. So we've all seen the player who gets tackled, they kick the ball, and after the ball is gone, that's when the sling happens. That's when the pull to the ground or the throw or the shove or whatever it might be, out of frustration or, again, willfulness of the tackling player, comes afterwards. And that's where you look, say, well, that occurred after the ball was gone, and there's grounds for a downfield free kick. So just be aware of, yes, it was a dangerous tackle. When did it happen relative to when the ball was disposed of? Is it the free kick here, or is the free kick down the ground? So players who are driven into the ground. So obviously we're aware of the push in the back rule, and we're always looking for the player being propelled forwards, looking for the player being squashed onto the ground from the back, but that can apply from any direction. So a player who's up on their feet and gets driven into from the side, from the front, from any direction, it can still be a dangerous tackle. So just because we look at push in the back and we think, oh, was the player pushed in the back? No, they were pushed in the side. That doesn't take the dangerous tackle out of the equation. It really is that drive, that push, that excessive use of force to the player who's been tackled from whichever direction it comes from. Then thirdly, the other key one is players who are taken from below their knees. That really then becomes quite serious, but you've taken someone's legs from below the knees out from under them. There's a real risk to their head clashing with the ground, with other player. Again, the player with the ball is no longer in control of their own destiny. So you've really got to watch out for that deliberate taken, or even indeliberate, but particularly the deliberate taken below the knees. And that involves getting on the ground and sliding into a player who's running with the ball, whatever it might be. So you're really looking to protect the player with the ball by making sure that someone's not deliberately taking their legs out from under them. That also counts as a dangerous tackle. Of course, it can work the other way, and I won't delve into this, but we also see in the big leagues a habit of players being tackled now starting to go to the ground and looking to take out the legs of the tackler. That's also dangerous, because at that point, even though the player's got the ball, they've chosen to take out the legs and thus make the head vulnerable of the player who is the tackler. So that's just also one to be aware of. Not necessarily key to the dangerous tackle discussion, but if you're looking at a contest where either player has gone to the ground and tried to take out the legs of their opponent, then that's really something we're looking for as a serious infringement, and one that may warrant something more than just a free kick. Right, I'm going to try and use my technical knowledge here. I've got a couple of YouTube examples to look at rather than just looking at slides all night, but it means I have to figure out how to do this. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to do this. I'm going to share. Which one? This one. All right, let me know if you can see this.
Yes, we can see your screen. It's not in motion yet.
No, it's not in motion yet. Okay, cool. We'll give it a go. See how the internet deals with all this, but so in the slides, which Sid will make available afterwards, there's a particular video to watch. It's called AFL Dangerous Tackles. There's actually quite a few of them aren't dangerous, but there's a couple that I've picked out that are particularly willful and particularly obvious and worth having a look at. So we'll quickly run through them. So there's the tackle and there's the sling. And I'll show it again in slow motion, and you can see the umpire's in good position there. Very quickly plays the dangerous tackle free kick. So thing to look for, players taking the ball, tackling players, picked him up off his feet and thrown him to the ground. So he's picked him off his feet, he slung them, you can see his head's hit the ground. It's very clearly a dangerous tackle. Very much a warranted free kick, and at our level, we'd potentially be looking for something more serious than that in terms of a penalty. There's arguably certainly a 25/50 metre penalty or a yellow card available there. All right, we'll find the next one, which should be right here. I'm hoping everyone can see this.
Is everyone else having trouble watching that?
Yeah, we'll have to put a link in, Richard, because unfortunately it's just jumpy and not
Sure.
in motion.
If I'll take the link, I'll put it in the chat if I can. Then perhaps people can jump in now if they wanted to go and grab the link and look at the times. Yeah, assuming I can drive Zoom. That's the body of chat.
I have a question. Is there a particular hand signal that we should be using if it's not, high, if it's not low, if it's not in the back, just for an overall dangerous tackle?
Yeah, sure. And so it's literally that type of standard.
Okay, so it's like the sling.
It's the sling. It's the
Sling, got it.
low across the body represents the dangerous tackle. And again, from a positioning perspective, from a discipline, from a match control perspective, if you see a dangerous tackle and blow your whistle, we would expect you to run to that contest. So you don't blow the whistle 20 meters away, say dangerous tackle, and stand there. That's your trigger point to get to that contest, because a dangerous tackle is one of the things that's most likely to blow up into an altercation. All right, I've put that link in the chat if anyone wants to jump in. Otherwise, I'll keep going and see if we'll perhaps work out a way of getting this into the video at the end. So we're at about minute 55, if anyone wants to follow along. So again, similar type of thing. And again, you'll see it hopefully again in a replay. It's the pickup, it's the throw to the ground, and you can see in this instance the player has actually been hurt, injured, his head's banged heavily. So another trigger there is a concussion consideration. So very clearly, as he's been picked up, he's no longer got any control over his destiny, and it's then the responsibility of the Richmond player in this instance to make sure he lands properly, and he doesn't. So it's a dangerous tackle. All right, moving on, because there's a couple here that don't really count. So about 2 minutes 50. So you can see this. That wasn't the sling so much. That was more the pickup and pile drive. That was just head straight into the ground for those who saw that. So again, pretty clear. And look, people say to me, well, the old question of how do you know when it's a push in the back? You'll just know. I think very much applies to a dangerous tackle. As an umpire watching the game, you should be able to tell when something is out of the ordinary and not necessary. So we've moved out of the dangerous tackle territory there. That's a high contact. So the last one I had was at 3 minutes and 20, which is, it is this one there. So that's an example there of after the ball is gone, wasn't really a tackle, but again, the player who's disposed of the ball doesn't really have control because they're still off balance from having disposed of the ball, and they've been taken out when they're vulnerable. All right, I'll stop sharing that. We'll come back to the slides in a second. Checking going for time. I need to keep moving or we'll run out of time. So, need to work out how to use Zoom again. You just call me Steve Arnott, anyone who's watching me struggle with the technology.
Just a reminder to everybody, we're putting some notes in the chat that should be important either for reference or there are some good questions that are popping in there.
Okay, so that's really it for dangerous tackles. And again, one of our roles as umpires is to protect, is to look out for player safety. It's critical, particularly in a league like this. We want people to be encouraged and to continue to participate. And if they go onto the ground thinking they're not going to get protection with the umpire, if they're going to be at risk of being injured by someone who's careless or reckless or wants to get them, then that's not going to do their football journey much good at all. All right, moving forward. So the second part was holding the ball. Our critical rules discussion. So hopefully you've seen this before. It's on the US AFL UA website. It's the decision-making chart. So how do we decide if it's holding the ball? I'm not going to go through the chart itself, but you'll see that it's broken up into two main areas. And the first one we just talked about is safety. That's where the dangerous tackle part comes in. Has the player been protected? Second part is making a decision as to whether or not it's holding the ball. So the objective here is fairness and in keeping the ball moving. They're the things that we're trying to achieve in doing that. So quickly delving into the rules, 18.6 covers the holding the ball rule. And the first part, the spirit intention. And this is important. The player has possession of the football and provided with an opportunity to dispose of the football before rewarding the opponent for a legal tackle. The player with the ball has to have a chance to get rid of it before they can be penalised. Now, there's two ways that can happen, and we'll delve into that in a second. An interesting statistic, give or take, 22% of all the decisions you make on the ground in a game will be a holding the ball decision. So it's a tackle, a legal tackle, and you'll have to decide, was that holding the ball or was it play on? The 22% doesn't mean it's a free kick. So a tackle and a decision to call play on, that's a decision that counts in that 22%. Okay, so the rule then breaks down into 4 separate areas about holding the ball. So first part, holding the ball, prior opportunity. Very quickly, so the player has had prior opportunity. The field umpire shall award a free kick if the player does not correctly dispose of the football immediately when they are legally tackled. That's the legalese, and we'll go into that a little bit more in the next slide. Holding the ball, incorrect disposal. Not going to go into that one tonight. But obviously, if you've not had a prior opportunity, then there are grounds that you can still be paid holding the ball, incorrect disposal. If you have had a prior opportunity, then you have to dispose of the ball legally, or it's a free kick. But we won't go into that now. Hold the ball, no genuine attempts. So there's an interesting one there. So if you've not had a chance to get rid of the ball, then you must attempt to get rid of it when you're tackled. So you can't just get tackled, hold onto it, roll on the ground and say, oh, I've been tackled, but I didn't have a prior opportunity. So we'll go into that one a little bit more in a sec too. And then lastly, the one that's always contentious is diving on top of the ball. So if a field umpire shall award a free kick against a player who dives on top of or drags the football underneath the body and fails to immediately not clear or correctly dispose of the ball when tackled. All right. So prior opportunity. So there are 7 cues that you can use to say the player had prior opportunity before they were tackled. This is not after the tackle. If they meet one of these criteria before they were tackled, then you can consider they had prior opportunity. So quickly working through them. So evade, so a change of direction by the player with the ball. So if you've got the ball and you choose to change direction to try and avoid the tackle, that's a decision you've made to try and avoid the tackle when you could instead have been disposing of it. So that's your prior opportunity. Likewise, defend. We've all seen the straight arm out. Let's attempt to fend the tackler off and see what happens. If that's not successful and you get tackled, well, again, you're choosing to put your arm out and try and fend off your opponent is your prior opportunity. We've had a prior option. So we see players who shape to handball, shape to kick, and they decide not to. Well, that's fairly clear and obvious. You've had a chance to dispose of the ball. You chose not to. If you're then tackled, you've had prior opportunity. Balanced and steadies. This is always I guess the most challenging one. So the player who's taken possession of the ball, they've started to move away. They've started to run. They might not be quite unbalanced. They have only taken a step, then they're tackled. What's a reasonable opportunity for deciding that they could or should have got rid of the ball before they got tackled. And the guidance that's given here is that they had clear control of the ball. They're not juggling it. It's not in their fingertips. It's not kind of half here or half there. And we kind of use a guide of if they've had sort of 3 steps to move with the ball, then they've got control of it and they've had prior opportunity. That's a kind of a cue that you can use to say, yep, you had a chance there. Every circumstance is going to be different, and you have to make your judgment based on the day. It could depend on the weather, could depend on the skills of the player, could depend on many other things that are happening on the ground. Take a mark or order a free kick. So if you take a mark and you choose to play on, and there happens to be, say, an opposition player standing right next to you, and the call of play comes on, then you can be tackled straight away, and you have to get rid of it because that was your prior opportunity. Because you chose not to kick it, you chose to play on. We'll come to rucks in a second because that's a slightly different case. Driving the head. So again, if you try and bust your way through a tackle by popping your head down and trying to barge through, not only is it not high contact because you've ducked your head, but you've also had prior opportunity because then you chose to took on the tackle. And again, ducking the act of ducking your head, running along, go from
It's gone to hell on us.
Richard, you still there?
to this other.
Richard, we lost your voice.
See if you can kind of make out the evades. There's a, oops, sorry, did someone say something? Often.
You're kind of going in and out, mostly out.
Everybody hang on. He put a note in the chat. He's asked for a second. Something's wrong with his on his side, apparently.
Mark, you can take over from here, I'm sure.
So just as a supplement to what Richard's been talking about, the holding the ball piece of this comes after the first 2 decisions you have to make. One is, does the player have the football? Yes, they do. Then they can be tackled. No, they don't. Holding the man. And then the second, is the tackle legal? And if it's not, then it's an illegal tackle and you pay the infringement. So once those 2 have been met, then you're into the holding the balls decision piece here. And as you can see, there's 7 things to help you decide, was it holding the ball or not. And this is whether or not prior opportunity has been had by the player with the ball. So it's not a bad idea to review this. And really what you really want to do is learn this decision tree by heart. So if somebody says holding the ball, you don't have to look at that chart. You can literally read the entire chart from memory and tell them how you make a holding the ball decision. If that's something you can do without thinking about it, then you're in a position to continue to move up the accreditation scheme.
I think I'm back. Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
Maybe.
Thanks, Sid.
All right. So
Sure,
Richard,
keep going.
we're just past the bottom of the hour, so we're going to have the goalies go ahead and break off into their subgroup or their breakout room, if they so choose, and the rest of us will hang out with you for the next 30 minutes or so, 25 minutes, and we'll take a few more minutes to finish off this and then go into the 2-man system. So go ahead and finish up with the holding the ball slide here and then jump into the 2-man.
Okay, the room's been open.
Oh, is there a link for it or something, or how do we go about jumping in there?
Did you get something popping up on your screen asking you if you want to join, or if not, look at the bottom of your screen?
Yep.
There should be a button or icon for breakout rooms.
There's room 1.
Should only be room for, there's only one room.
Yeah, so you
Richard, are you back?
can join the room if you want to stay here, and join the room if you want to talk call umpires. I am. Can you hear me?
Can hear you now. Yeah. So go ahead and finish your holding the ball slide here, and then jump into the 2-umpire system.
Okay, look, there's some picture examples of the opportunity section. There's a slide there, and people will look at this afterwards, or we can perhaps go through it later. A slide on no genuine attempt, a slide on diving on top of the football, and all that summarizes back then to that decision-making chart.
Yeah, and we'll
All right.
include the slides as a separate link on our website, so you can review this in more detail rather than having to review the slides inside here. So we'll have both available eventually on the website.
Cool. All right. So quickly into the 2-umpire system. So the objective here, have or haven't, and describe a little bit of positioning and control triggers, and we're hoping to lead to some better teamwork as umpires, better positioning for each play, because the better position we are, the better decisions we'll make and the better outcomes for the game. So the key points of the 2-umpire system are, firstly, that only one umpire should be in control at any one time. Doesn't mean number 2 has a holiday or takes a rest, make decisions. Primary umpire making always be a change of control from the number 1 umpire to the number 2 umpire. So if you're officiating, if you're the number 1, you give control away. If you're the number 2 or the off the ball umpire, you should never take control, because that just leads to confusion. Trigger points for handover are not always obvious. There are some rules that we can go through, but you will always need to adapt on the day. But we're always looking to make sure that we don't leave the other guy or girl high and dry because we've suddenly just handed them control when they weren't ready for it or prepared for it. And then obviously we keep working through the whole game, adjusting positions. We're ready for the next step of play. Right, quickly on some terminology. So we call the number 1 umpire, or number 1, as the umpire who's currently in control of the play. And they're otherwise referred to as the umpire. You might see that terminology used. Number 2 is the umpire who's not currently official. And those roles change. So as control is handed from one to the other, the role of number 1 and number 2 swaps backward and forward at a time. And that's obviously by a process of handover. So we hand over control from 1 to number 2, and back again as the play and the movement of the ball requires. Okay, so the general theory is that the 2 umpires are just short of a long kick apart from each other. But as the play moves, then both umpires should be moving as well. It's not a case of this is my half of the ground, that's your half of the ground. Both umpires are continually positioning up and down the ground. So the non-officiating, the number 2 umpire, is just short of a decent sized kick away from where the ball is currently in play. Now, I apologize for the symbols. I had a limited range. For this exercise, the guy who is facing forward is the controlling umpire. The guy who's facing backwards is the non-controlling, the number 2 umpire. It's not a great set of symbols. I apologize. And I can kind of work out the players from there. But here, obviously, you've got a contest. You've got the umpire, the number 1, is in control of the contest, which might be a ruck contest going on or a contested for a mark. And number 2 is there ready for the net to play. So if the ball is to be kicked to the right, and a decent sized kick, that's where the next contest is likely to happen, and the umpire is just short of that and ready for the ball to come. Okay, we talk about the tram lines. Now, obviously in North America, we might call them tram lines, we might call them trolley car lines or street car lines or something appropriate, but in Australia, they're known as tram lines because we have trams that run down the streets. So imagine a set of lines that run down the ground pretty much from forward pocket to forward pocket, there or thereabouts on the center square as your line. So there's the black line shown there. So during the game, with some exceptions, you're trying to stay within the tram lines. The reason for that is really about you get a kick that comes away from you, goes in the wrong direction. If you're on the other side of play, all of a sudden you'll end up 30, 40, 50 meters away, 60 meters away from the play. Your number 2 umpire won't be in a position to help you, and then you're going to have trouble making a decent decision. So we have here the officiating umpire, they're in the tram lines, they're 20 to 25 meters away, parallel with play. I apologise for using meters. I don't do feet too well, 70 or 80 feet for the sake of argument from the contest. That's you. Okay. You'll see the number 2 there is in the centre of the ground. So they're slightly closer to the centre or slightly further away from the play than the controlling umpire. And the reason for that is if the kick comes from the contest, let's say it comes towards the centre of the ground, or even just came into the centre square, then all of a sudden you can find yourself underneath the ball or too close to the contest. So it's much easier to run towards a contest that you're perhaps a little bit too far away from than to back away from one that you found yourself underneath the football. So if you're the number 2 umpire, to be that kick away and further away from the main axis of the player to give yourself that protection. All right, at a centre bounce, so it's important that you have both umpires on opposite sides of the contest, because then you've got of the play. If you're both the same side, then you're going to miss that. The number 2 umpire can be, again, I think my internet's going to go in a minute, starting to complain. But if you can hear me, again, so you just short of kick, and coming in a little bit closer just to provide some additional support in that centre bounce scenario. If you're the number 2 umpire, again, you're not sitting there resting. It's your job to count the number of players in the square. Does each team have 4? Yes, no. And you're using a peripheral vision to look for any other centre square infringements, particularly where we don't have competent or qualified boundary umpires. You're the eyes and the ears as to players come to the square before they should. Next specific. So kicking towards the 50-meter arc. So again, the contest that we've got here, we've got play in the forward pocket on the wing. Number 1's the duty in the contest. You can see where number 2 is in this instance. So number 2 is in the 50 arc. They fairly deep. They don't need to go too far down towards the goals because it's more important that they're right up on the other side of the tram lines, furthest away from the play as possible, because that centering kick is going to come from the contest. It's going to come towards the forwards. If you were standing on the center line of the ground or even closer, that kick is going to come straight at you. And before you know it, you're going to be wearing 2 or 3 players contesting the ball. So again, that idea of being further away rather than closer means you can move towards the contest rather than having to back away from it. That makes your life easier. All right. The other scenario we need to work out, this is probably one of the ones where you can come out of the tram lines, where you do need to come out to the side of play. So for a boundary throw-in, we've got our boundary umpire here, we've got the ruckman in the middle there. So firstly, which side do you want to be on? So you look at where number 2 is, you look at where number 1 is, and you can see they should almost always, with one exception, be on opposite sides of the contest. So now you've got number 2 with the contest from one side, and you've got the umpire with their eyes on the contest on the complete opposite side. Now, to get a good adjudication of the contest, you want to start near the boundary line, so you can help control the throw-in. That's figuring out if the rucks are, perhaps calling out the players to not hold. You might need to give instructions to the boundary umpire, particularly if they're a club umpire. Step in, take your throw now, etc. Be ready. At that point, you're moving as the throw comes in. You're looking to be side onto the contest, or slightly shorter side onto the contest as the contest takes place. And then you've really got to work back to the tram lines, because again, a kick from there that went to the right and went to, say, the far top right corner of the centre square, and all of a sudden you're 60, 70, 80 metres away from the contest. Your number two can't save you. And that's, you know, one of the times where you're likely or potentially will get stuck and miss a decision because you're just too far away. So adjudicating that right contest, being side on, not behind the play, is important. We want to be side on or in front of the play to see what's going on. We can't see what's happening from behind the play. But at that point, you need to work hard to get back into the middle. So the exception to that, as I said, is the ball is deep in the forward line, and that's where the boundary throwing is taking place. If you try and stay on the opposite side to the number two umpire, then you will end up caught up in the goalposts and full forwards and things like that. So in that case, you would loop around and stay on the longer side of the ground. Kick him from behind. So again, very quickly, so number one is just behind the player on the mark. We'll have the 15 metres out from the 9 metre line that the player on the mark needs to be. So you would be just behind that. And you're controlling what's happening in that forward pocket. So you're controlling players to leave the area, you're controlling the player on the mark, and you are controlling the player with the ball, not to time waste, and giving them their instructions they need to move on with the play. You're also in a position there, the best position to call play on as soon as the play leaves the goal square. The number two umpire wants to be just outside the 50 metre arc. And what you want to make sure is you look at where the players are gathering, waiting for the kick out. So if there's 5 or 6 or 7 players all gathering somewhere around that 50 metre arc, all waiting for the kick to come out, you don't want to be standing amongst them. You want to be standing 2, 3 or 4 metres behind them. And that way you can see what's going on. You can see who's leading. And particularly you can see who's impinged, who's blocked, who's held, and who's obstructed from going for that ball. As the kick comes out, you would normally expect that the number one umpire in this instance would keep control of the play. They're already, just, you know, in the order of halfway to where the next contest is going to be in the worst case. Obviously, if the guy comes out of the goal square, runs 15 metres quickly and kicks a torp to sort of somewhere down centre wing, then you would hand over, but we'd be looking for the number one to hold control, at least for that first kick out of the back line. Set shot to goal. So Mark saw a free kick at the 50. So looking for the number one umpire to set the mark and set the angle. And then they can back off. And as they back off, ready for potentially a goal line contest or something of that nature, the number two comes down and supervises the mark in the protected area. And obviously the handover comes as the kick it goes down the ground. Now, if that set shot at goal is from 20 metres out, 25 metres out, then there's no point in doing that. It's quite possible for the number one umpire to control both the mark and the goal line with one field of view. But as soon as you're talking 30 to 40 metres or more distance out from there, then we're looking for number two to come down and provide that support. Okay, last quickly, subject is this change of control. So it's really critical that we don't have 2 umpires in control, and it's even more critical that we have no umpires in control, as you're both looking at each other going, I thought you were in control. I thought you're in control. So that's where it's really critical to have good communication between each other. And we want to make sure the best umpire has the umpire with the best position has control at all times. So as I said at the start, it's critical that only the number one, only the guy who's umpiring at the time should give up control. The number two should never take control. If you think, you know, that you're in the best position, you just got to back out, get out of the way, and then, you know, the next goal, the next opportunity, just have a chat and say, hey, I think you're holding on to control for too long. This is really what the communication is really about. We'll do some of this in the rules, but communication is the key. But communication can be many forms. It can be verbal, yours, mine, etc., etc. It can be non-verbal, so you can use your body language very clearly to communicate to the other guy what you're doing at any given time. But at this level, we'd expect that you would be using verbal. It's not like the MCG. There's not 50,000 people roaring their heads off, or you can't hear. And that's what the guys at the top level have, is they can't hear each other, so they have to do their communication non-verbally. So the keywords you're looking for are yours or you. So I'm giving up control, and where it's appropriate, mine, to acknowledge that you've given me control. they're the key words that we're looking at. We want to avoid things like yours on the kick. Some people say, it's just saying, okay, once this ball's kicked, then it's your play. That's great. I've had it happen though where the ball is tapped or the ball is partly smothered. It goes 10 or 15 meters down the ground, and then who's got control? The guy who's given up control is in the best position. The guy who's given control to is going, well, I shouldn't have control of it because it's back where you are. So we're just trying to avoid that. And then build for it or whatever it might be. Perhaps it's not the best use of terminology. Probably not so critical at this level. But again, it just in terms of being consistent, and if we all know that a call of you or yours means that you are being handed control, that's easier to distinguish than trying to pick out someone's name from amongst the noise. The important thing here is that you're really looking to give your partner confidence to know that you'll be there, that you'll be in the right spot, and then they don't have to look for you and making a decision on handing over. There's nothing worse than going, all right, I can see the decent kick here. I'm not sure where the other guy is. Oh, look, is he in position or is he 80 meters down the ground? I want to know that a kick of a reasonable length, I can call yours confidently. I can watch the play. I can watch the ball where it's just been disposed. I don't have to look down the ground and try and figure out where the other guy is and to decide whether or not I can or can't give them control.
Richard, we have a question. Can you describe what the nonverbal?
Yeah, we'll do it at Austin, but so some of the nonverbals are if you are keeping control or acknowledging that you're taking control. Is a tap on the chest. That's a mine. So I'm keeping control, or in that case, I'm taking control. In the running down the ground, for example, if either the play's moving down the ground and you're going to keep moving with it, you would give up control by sort of standing still, putting your arms by your side and not moving. That's kind of your I've stopped.
Yeah, it's the
And then keep going.
It's
from
gonna be
there.
done in 9 minutes. Oh yeah. Yeah,
So there's background.
Somebody's
talking.
not on mute.
It might be
I
Rob.
am, and I'm going to
There we go. Sorry, Richard.
Okay, so the last thing is deciding whose area is who. So drawing some lines here. So you've got a contest again down the bottom. You've got a green section, which is if the ball goes anywhere in that green section, give or take, is where the number one is going to keep control. So that's a ball that goes across the ground. It's a kick that goes short. And really then time you're looking to relinquish control is a kick that goes, where number two is ready. So if you look at the number two, for example, the kick that goes short, if you hand over control to the guy who's down by the 50 arc, they are now behind the play. So they're not in a position to make a good decision because they're behind the play. So it's really that idea of who's got the best position. If the ball's gone short, the ball's gone across the ground. If the ball's gone towards the boundary line, I'm going to keep control because I've got the best positioning to make the best view and make the best decisions at the next contest.
There's another question coming up, but before we jump into that question, Richard, one of the things that I try and get everybody to do when they're deciding, especially when they're new at the 2-umpire system, is make the decision to hand off or not hand off quickly. I don't really care if it's right or wrong. I just need you to make the decision quickly so your partner knows what's going on. If that kick is in the middle, like you see number two, it's kind of halfway in between the two. I don't care if you're handing off or if you're keeping control there, as long as you're communicating. That's the number one thing. If you don't do anything, then the number two umpire is wondering, did they hand off or did they not hand off? So get in the habit of, as soon as that kick is made, decide, is that long enough? Does it go to where I need to relinquish control or not? Just make that decision quickly. It's not a matter whether it's right or wrong. It's just got to be quick.
And again, that confidence thing, if you know where your partner is going to be and then where you expect them to be, then it's much easier to make that decision.
Right. So those are the things we look for when we're doing coaching and observing during nationals, is to, are you, especially when you're newer, are you starting to understand how to make this happen?
So that the size and shape of the green area and the red area, if you like, who's the number one there is going to change for every active play and for wherever the ball is and for what's going on. But you kind of use that indication to get an idea of really making sure that I'm going to keep the play if I think I've got the best view of the next active play. But if I think the other guy's going to have a better view, then that's when I'm going to relinquish control. All right, that's it. Questions? We've got some characters there. We can draw some scenarios if people want.
There is another question, Richard. So
Sorry,
Mark Stauffer is asking, and actually you can keep that slide up for the moment.
Yeah, I
But
can move
the
this one
question
around.
is, what if number 2 sees off-ball penalties?
Yes, so as I said at the start, if you're number 2, you're not fast asleep. You're not going, oh, look, hey, there's a nice looking person over there, or could do with a drink right now, or tying up your shoelaces. You're still officiating the game. So we are expecting that you will pay free kicks, particularly blatant ones. So if it's a line ball holding the ball decision, by definition, you should be further away. You should be in a worse position to be adjudicating that free kick. So you'd be less likely to pay a hold in the ball. But things like a push in the back, definitely a high contact, definitely a dangerous tackle, definitely after the ball has left the contest area and perhaps the number 1 umpire has had to turn and move to where the ball's next gone, you absolutely should, and we expect you to pay those free kicks. And that's part of, and there's always going to be a scenario where the guy who's umpiring is not sighted. They can't see what's happening for whatever reason. And so you might need to pay a hold in the ball. You might need to pay an incorrect disposal. For example, if the players are running away from the umpire and one of them clearly throws it, but with their back to the umpire and you can see it, number 1 can't, then absolutely pay that decision.
Right. So just for terminology, we call that the assist when the number 2 sees an infringement that needs to get called. Primarily, as Richard said, those are going to be the dangerous tackles. If the players here, as you can see, the umpire should be trying to box in the play and keep as many players between them as possible. So if you look at the center square, 1 umpire on one side, 1 umpire on the other, and there's 10 or 15 players in the middle here, the number 1 umpire is not going to be able to see everything, especially on the back side of the pack. And so if there's a hold or if there's anything dangerous or something worthy of a dangerous type situation, doesn't have to be a tackle. But that's what we call the assist. And so it is expected that we want to get the calls right as a team. And as Richard also said, holding the ball is really not likely one that you're going to call. It's really looking for or holding the ball, holding the man, or dangerous tackles, that kind of stuff, pushing the back, things like that are off the ball, but creating an unfair advantage for whoever does the infliction.
Yeah, so Mark, that answers your question. So number 2, you can still play free kicks. Obviously, the priority is the things for which the number 1 is unsighted, and obviously anything that involves player safety. And I think that ties in, Thomas, to your question. So if there was a conflicting call, so let's say 1 umpire, it doesn't matter which one plays holding the ball, the second umpire says, no, that's a clear push in the back. Under the decision-making flowchart, for example, the push in the back makes it not a legal tackle, so that free kick takes priority. So anything that's around player safety, you would expect to take priority. Other than that, you would expect the number 1's call to take priority. In practice, when you see it, it's very unlikely. The things that you get conflicting free kicks where it's not something obvious like a high contact or something that's very clearly, no, that's a free kick that needs to go to the tackled player as opposed to the tackling player, for example.
That's a good description there about when you, for the next questions coming up. So T-Bone's asking, what if there are conflicting calls? And you just described a certain scenario where there's an infringement that would be higher on the decision-making tree, as you said. So what if it's not necessarily in the decision-making tree like that, but what happens if there are conflicting calls?
I think my internet's going slightly patchy again, but you would expect the umpire, so the number 1, would normally take priority in their call there. But as I say, in practice, and some people have different experiences, you'd find it very, very rare that there's conflicting calls where one of them is not something like a push in the back or a high contact, in which case that will take the obvious priority.
Yeah, Richard, this is Mark. One of the things is understanding that there might be a different who gets priority in the calls, but also just in that off-ball call, what does number 2 say to number 1 to say, hey, I've seen something off. Hey, number 1, mine, I've seen something. Or if there's a conflicting call, do they come together, make some kind of signal or nonverbal to come together, discuss the conflict, and then part? What are the communications and signals to say, hey, I've got something over here?
So obviously, if you're number 2 and you see a free kick, you blow your whistle, loud, confident, and strong. So that's going to stop the play, and it's going to get number 1 looking at you. You would then make your normal indication, so pushing the back, holding the ball, high contact, whatever it might be, and importantly, signal the direction of the free kick. At the same time, you need to be talking to number 1 to tell them what's happening. And again, that's a reason not to be 80 meters away, but to be 30 or 40 meters away. Is get that voice comes, free kick, 17, Nashville, high contact, or something like that. And that's just getting that communication. And sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 goes, and sometimes you might need to come together to get it sorted out. Don't be afraid if you're number 2 and the number 1 is not understanding what you're saying or they're confused. Feel free to run up there and help sort it out. But hopefully through verbal communication, you can get enough information across to them so they can understand what's going on and sort it out. If they can't, then you need to come together, obviously, and make it. But if you've paid a free kick and as number 2 and number 1 hasn't understood, and perhaps they let the play continue, or they give the ball to the wrong player and the ball goes on, blow your whistle against. Get it right, get the decision, get the ball where it should be. And look, it looks messy, it's not ideal, but ultimately we end up with the right outcome, which is the right player gets the free kick for being offended against. So yes, ideally it's comms from a distance. You're making clear, strong whistle, clear decision, clear signals, and that communication, and then until you get it right, basically. Hopefully, once is enough. It might be twice. Worst case, you've just got to get in there and sort it out.
I have a question, kind of in that I've seen play out. What's the correct kind of resolution? Say you have a pack situation. Guy properly disposes of the ball, but the umpire who has control calls incorrect disposal. You're on the other side. See, he did get a hand to it. If the play is stopped because the whistle's blown, do you give it back to the team for a free kick?
So you would be unlikely to stop that because that's.
But the other, okay, you just go with the umpire. Well, so my
Yeah.
point, the umpire in control has stopped the play saying incorrect disposal. You just roll with that.
That's right, because you can't start yelling play on as the number 2.
Right. So that's what I've seen. So I've seen the play on, play. They start yelling play on, play on, play on, and umpire 2 is trying to say it was a correct disposal, right? He was trying to interfere and say, no, he got a hand
in control, so you can't yell play on.
Okay.
All you can do is blow your whistle and pay a free kick if it's something that's warranted and hasn't been seen by the number 1. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, let's just emphasize that. So if you're a number 2 umpire and you're watching the ball so closely that you're trying to make a decision in your head, whether it's holding the ball or not, what are you not doing? You're not watching the other 18 minus 2 players on each side. That's your job, is to watch the rest of the players, not to watch the ball. So if you're saying, oh my gosh, he actually got his hand and got a fist to it, you're not doing your job. So don't worry about whether or not a minor issue of a handball or an illegal disposal was the correct call or the incorrect call from your partner. You're supposed to be 25 to 30 yards away watching all the other stuff.
Yeah, it's a good point, Jeff. You see it happens. The other guy makes a decision. Someone comes and asks you a question about it. So I say, I wasn't watching that closely. I was watching everything else going on the ground.
Talk about it. Talk about it. Break
out, but
yeah,
it's actually the
talk
case.
at halftime, talk at a quarter break. You can say, oh, just, and you're not doing anything to say, you screwed up. It's like, oh, by the way, you might not even say anything, but really, it's not your job to be watching the ball that closely as number 2. You want to keep an eye on it for when that handoff happens, but you're not watching it close enough to be able to make a decision. You got a partner for that. All right, we're just past the hour. Our goalies are back with us now, so welcome back to that group. So what we're going to do now is officially call an end to this particular clinic. And we will get the, Sid will take the slides that we have and the recording, and we'll get those out onto the website. It usually takes about a week or so to get that out there. So thanks to everybody for being on the call. Those that are still on the call that have more questions, stick around, keep asking, we'll keep answering, we'll keep going. And then if you need to leave, then we'll see you next time, hopefully at Nationals, if that's your next destination. And if you're not coming to Nationals, then we'll see you next year. So thanks again, everybody. And thanks, Richard, for taking us through these two sections.
Thanks, Chris.
And with that, we'll jump into the official Q&A piece.
Okay, just a reminder that we put our updates on our website, usaflua.org, and make sure that if you didn't already look in the chat for other pertinent information and answers to many questions. All right, I'm going to shut the recording off. Thank you. But as Jeff said, please stick around if you want to chat or have other questions.